Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on the Sin Bin Trade Deadline Show, along with Kristen Wooten down there in the bottom of the screen. I'm Matthew Harding. She'll be along here throughout. She's co-hosting with me this year and definitely classing up the joint. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you today?
I'm doing well. The trade deadline has come and gone across the entire ECHL. It was a somewhat busy day compared to last year when we had many trades across the this year. About half as many we had in 2017, where we had 13 last year. We had seven this year, but still some impact players moved even ahead of the deadline.
Did any of them
So,
surprise you too much?
uh, no, because I thought the Quad City offload of their players was coming. I thought that it would be a little bit more extensive than it was. My understanding was that everybody was um, up for sale there. So the fact that it was not as extensive this year with Quad City anyway as it was in previous years is, or as it was with some teams in previous years, I guess is a good thing. I thought that Greenville would offload some players. That didn't happen this year. They offloaded a couple, but not any of their mainstays. So that tells me that they're probably going to retool more than rebuild in the offseason. But no great surprises to me coming out of the deadline. I guess if we were looking at teams who added more than we thought it would, probably my guess there would have my guess there is that Florida added probably a couple of depth pieces, and they were really good pieces for them to pick up. They've already clinched a playoff berth, and so now Brad Ralph is probably in the business of tinkering with the team more than anything. So it'll be interesting to see how the pieces that they acquired fit. Jimmy DeVito and Sam Morning from the Quad City Mallards. But we'll talk all about that, and we'll hopefully get to your team coming up here as we go on through this next hour and a half. We have a jam-packed show for you coming up here in about 5 minutes. DJ Abasilla from the Wheeling Nailers will join us at 7:50 Eastern Time, 6:50 Central. Josh Heisman, who covers the Manchester Monarchs, will join us. Then at the top of the 8 o'clock hour, we'll have Jesse Liebman from the Orlando Solar Bears. Kristen and I will take a break and we'll catch you up on what happened here so far at the deadline. And then on the back end, we'll have Cameron Turner, who will talk about the Tulsa Oilers. Joe Roberts will talk about the Kalamazoo Wings. And then the boss, Joe Rozicki, and CC Hockley will join Kristen and I, and we'll talk about all of our teams that we cover respectively for the Sin Bin, and we'll also give you some winners and losers coming up here at the trade deadline. But let's go ahead and we'll start by giving you a breakdown of the day as it happened. A lot of what was announced actually happened after the 3 p.m. Eastern deadline, and it came out with the transaction wire here about 90 minutes ago. So let's run you through what happened here earlier on this Thursday. We kicked it off with a trade between Wichita and Wheeling. That was Nolan Dakota going to the Thunder for cash, leaving the wheel and coming to the Wichita Thunder. One of the bigger surprises of this day, Kristen, and we'll talk about this a little later, Jamie Dornbosch going from Brampton to Toledo in exchange for Toledo's leading scorer in Eric Bradford. Brock Bukaboom going from Cincinnati, or going from Worcester to Cincinnati for cash considerations. Charlie Vassaturo going from Kalamazoo to Reading for futures. Kitten Miller went from Rapid City to Adirondack in exchange for Andrew Rajanovic and futures. Robbie, oh my gosh, here. Robbie Balajarno. Jesse will help me with that coming up here in a little while. Went from South Carolina to Orlando, and as we mentioned earlier, with Jimmy DeVito in the final deal of the day, going from Reading to Florida. Briefly, there anything as we talked about, anything stand out to you there?
I can't say I'm surprised that one of your guys over in Wichita, former Tyler Van Cleef, he was one of them. I think he was in Wheeling for all of 13, 14 days tops.
Mhm.
One that definitely didn't surprise me that you pointed out. And how did you say his name? Bookaboom? I've been calling him Boomer over text, talking to people about him ever since.
Brock Bukaboom, son of NHLer Jeff Bukaboom.
Translation, I should know that. But I can't say I'm honestly surprised. Cincinnati needs, in theory, him. We'll see what he brings to the table. Cincinnati needs a D man though. With hopefully we're making a playoff push here with Alex Kyle and Karabacek now going up to Rochester. We're leading our forwards even more now. So our goaltending has been stronger recently. However, we definitely need our blue line to step it up a little bit when Nolan's playing lesser. So hopefully we'll see big things from him.
All right. Well, right on time, fashionably early as always. We are joined by the voice of the Wheeling Nailers, DJ Abasilla. How's it going, DJ?
It's going. How are you?
Good. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us this evening. Give us a little bit of insight. You guys made a couple of moves here on Thursday, or ahead of the deadline, and on Thursday. One of them, you sent Nolan Dakota to Wichita for cash considerations, and then another one rounding out the Marcus Basara trade with Allen, sending JC Campagna to North Texas. A couple of moves there in the last 24 hours. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to what went into those moves?
Yeah, and surprisingly, it was a somewhat quiet trade deadline for the Nailers, who have been making moves at an unreal rate as of late. So far, Wheeling has used 51 different players this season, which is the most in the ECHL, and is just 2 away from the team record of 53. But 2 moves where, I guess, kind of leading up to it, they were moves earlier in the year where the Nailers were struggling to find people. They were battling a lot of call-ups to AHL, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and to a few other places. So now the roster is starting to get in shape, especially offensively, and I think that's why JC Campagna was expendable to complete that future consideration deal with Allen. And then Nolan Dakota, who they got from Indy, just wasn't really quite fitting in the way that they had hoped, so that's why that move got made to Wichita.
For Thunder fans who are watching this, can you tell us a little bit about what kind of defenseman Nolan Dakota is and can be for Wichita moving forward?
I'll do my best, because he was only here in Wheeling for 6 games, so we didn't really get a huge sample size of Nolan. But from what I've been told and from what I've heard and seen from his time around the league, of course, he's an ECHLer for over 200 games. He was part of that Allen team in 2015 that went to the Kelly Cup and actually won it in 7 games against South Carolina. So he has that experience of success in the playoffs. That being said, he likes to play as a power play quarterback, maybe not necessarily a top unit, but can certainly fit that role of a puck-moving defenseman and somebody who's going to be steady for you back there on the blue line.
And then JC Campagna, you said, I'm used to saying Campagna, but anyway, headed to North Texas. Again, small sample size with him, but what can Allen Americans fans expect from him moving forward?
He surprised me a little bit when he first came to Wheeling, because if you look at the stat line, you see that he has a lot of assists. So the first thing you would think is, okay, this guy is a playmaker. He's going to be looking to move the puck and find teammates as quickly as possible. But in the first few games that he played here in Wheeling, he had a lot of shots. He had 9 shots in his second game. So all of a sudden I see a different dynamic than what I expected from him. He moves his feet well. He sees the ice. He creates opportunities. So I think when things are going well and he's healthy, that was unfortunately one of the things that plagued him here in Wheeling, was keeping him out of the lineup with injuries. But when he's healthy and at his strongest, he can be a very big part of an offense. And that could be a big acquisition for Allen down the stretch here, needing to get into the playoffs.
You guys have had a couple of banged up goaltenders here recently. Adam Morrison just coming back to the lineup here over the last couple of days, and had a very strong showing against Worcester on yesterday morning. Can you tell us a little bit about what the goaltending situation is like there? You guys have Matt O'Connor behind. Adam Morrison. Now, is that going to be the 1-2 tandem headed down the stretch here, or are you guys expecting more help from Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and further up the chain?
So far, that's how it stands right now. Colin Stevens just went on injured reserve today, so he'll be out for at least a little while. Keep your eyes open. You may see another goaltender added as early as tomorrow morning. I can't tell you who that's going to be yet, but just a little teaser there for you. But with that being said, goaltending's been an interesting position this season. This is a team that has a lot of offensive firepower. When you have everybody clicking, and there's 420 goal scorers on this team with Reed Gardner, Cody Wido, Riley Bourbonnais, and Garrett Mears. That being said, the flip side of that is there has been an issue with giving up too many goals from time to time. But Morrison, starting at the beginning when he first got to Wheeling, kind of struggled out of the gate. He was still trying to get his way back into game form after sitting out the beginning of the year with injury with Rapid City. Now getting back into his lineup, getting back into his groove. He's gotten a lot of wins, and he's basically turned into what they had hoped to see, which would be the number one guy and most likely the guy carrying the mail going towards playoffs.
Kristen, do you have anything for DJ?
Can you hear me? I guess is the first thing. I just got your message. Can you guys hear me?
Hopefully.
I didn't hear that very well. Can you translate for me, Matt?
I cannot. I'm having trouble hearing Kristen. So, Kristen, I will we'll try this. We'll try this again. I'll shoot Kristen the link and see if she can rejoin us here. So, while I'm doing that, what you guys are locked in a tight race with Reading now 1 point behind them and 5 points or 6 points out of the division lead with Manchester. Did you get the sense that, I mean, this is still really anybody's division here moving forward, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I think you don't see any races like this in any of the other divisions around the league. Yes, there are races around the league, but there's so many teams battling. Like, I think you look at the South and you say, okay, it's pretty much Florida and South Carolina, right? Central's probably Toledo and Fort Wayne, and the Mountain more than likely Colorado. Maybe Idaho makes a run late, but the North is so wide open. There hasn't been necessarily a team that I look at that says, wow, this team is so much more powerful than everybody else in the group that they should walk away with this. Manchester's been up there for most of the year, but they've slumped in the last week or so. Adirondack pretty much knocked right on their door last week and said, hey, we're here. We've beaten Manchester 3 out of 5, so I can't look at it and say that they're a force to be reckoned with that's, unknockable out of that top spot. Adirondack's very good. Wheeling has beaten Manchester 3 out of 5, Adirondack 2 out of 3. If there's one that the Nailers have struggled against, and hopefully that turns around this weekend, it's been Reading, as the Royals have beaten Wheeling 6 out of 9 thus far. When Reading's healthy, they're a pretty scary team top to bottom. And then Worcester had started to peak over the last month or so, trying to make a little bit of a late run, but that was a huge win yesterday for Wheeling to make that an 8-point gap for that last playoff spot. So hopefully a few more wins. You'd think that at least 500 would at least get you in. Obviously, you want to do better than that and try and get a home ice advantage spot.
What is it about the Reading Royals that causes you guys such fits? Is it the goaltending that they have? Because this is a different goaltending tandem now than when you faced them earlier in the year.
All three of them have played well against us too, Muse, Dekanich, and Com. So I think their goaltending has had their moments where they've been very good. Their forwards, Alex Krushelnyski is a very good player. Matt Willows has been phenomenal ever since he got into the ECHL. The Nailers held him very much in check 2 years ago in the playoffs when they played him in the first round with Florida. But since he came to Reading, he's been an integral part of their offense and really one of the straws that stirs the drink for them. I really like Michael Huntebrinker, too, the rookie who played in the All-Star game from Reading this year. I think they have a very balanced offensive attack, and they have some guys defensively who can play good roles, too. Nick Luco, who has developed an offensive side of his game, but he's also very responsible on his own end. So I like him for Reading as well. And I think that kind of has been what's helped them get to where they are. Not to mention they're very good at home, where we've played them, I want to say, 6 out of those 9 games, where we've only seen them 3 times here in West Banco.
Yeah, absolutely. DJ Abasilla from the Wheeling Nailers joining us here on the Sin Bin Trade Deadline show. We have talked about the Wheeling Nailers so far this year, and just doing the breakdown on you guys. You guys have 6 30-point guys, 5 40-point guys, and a 50-point guy. With the deadline now over, if I were to ask you 24 hours ago, what would be an area Jeff Christian would have tried to get some help in, what would it have been?
I think defense, and I think that's based on the state of the roster as we speak, where you have let's go three. You have Danny Fick, Dan Milan, and Ross McMullen, who have been here as your backbones for most of the season, especially Milan, who's the only guy who's played in every game. And what just an exciting player, a good person. The fans have taken a liking to him, and he's had a really good year, both offensively and defensively. But now, so that's three. Zach Tolkinen's out of the lineup. He and Milan were your top D pairing for most of the season. He's hurt. Hope to get him back by the end of the regular season, if not early in the playoffs. But then there's three other guys on defense who are up in Wilkes-Barre Scranton right now. Kevin Schulz, who last year was an ECHL all-rookie team guy, and then two NHL and AHL contracted guys in Jeff Taylor and Dylan Zink. So when you take a core of 7 defensemen and 4 of them are either hurt or in the AHL, it leaves you in a tough situation. And I think if Jeff could have maybe bandaged that a little bit, he would have liked to. But at the same time, when you have such an explosive offensive team, you don't want to alter things too much, and you really want to make sure you're getting your value for what you get in return. So I don't think he was going to trade it just to do it. I think he was going to do it in order to get something back. And obviously he didn't get what he was hoping for, so he kept the team in check for the moment.
It sounds like, from everything that I've heard from those who I've talked to around the league, it sounds like there are 20 teams looking for defense. Is that pretty much the same thing that Jeff Christian ran into as he was trying to make the rounds and shake a few trees this afternoon?
I'd believe that, yeah. And I think that with the teams that have the defense, I think they probably know that they have a wanted commodity. And I think there's also so many teams that are still in contention now that there's not many sellers, so to speak. I think even though Brampton may be a little bit further back in the north, I don't necessarily think that they're ready to sell off everything yet. I think that the South, there's still teams that are 5th, 6th, 7th that still feel like they might have a chance to catch an Atlanta. I think maybe Rapid City and Quad City are the only two that are truly out of it in the Central and the Mountain. So there wasn't necessarily a big gap between buyers and sellers. So you have a good cluster of teams that were banging on the same coaches' doors today, seeing what they could get for moves out of them.
All right. Sounds good. We will obviously continue to follow the Nailers as we head on through the rest of the regular season. John Hafer, our writer there, does a very good job. DJ, it's always great to have you on here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to join us. All the best to the Nailers down the stretch and into the playoffs.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. We're looking forward. We got the Stanley Cup here on Saturday night, and of course those 2 big games with Reading. So it should be some fun times in Wheeling.
Absolutely. So there he goes, DJ Abasilla, joining us from Wheeling, there where the Stanley Cup will be in the big wheel coming up this weekend, as they have a pair with the Reading Royals. I'm trying to work on Kristen's audio. I just didn't bring her on for window decorations, people. Your thoughts there on what you heard from DJ?
Can you hear me?
Maybe. All right. You might have to check your computer volume.
Oh, that's so awkward. Okay.
Yeah, you might have to do that while we're waiting on getting Josh Heisman on here to talk about the Manchester Monarchs. So I'm going to let you do that, and while she's trying to figure that out, because unfortunately, the part about doing a show with Google Hangout is that I can't be there with her to do the show. So if we have any tech issues, we're on our own island. But as we get ready to bring on Josh, one of the more puzzling moves of the week was the move that happened, I believe it was Monday, where Justin Augusta went from Manchester to Worcester for Ashton Rome. And I've talked to Josh, and we've talked to Josh regularly over the last several days, and I don't know if Josh has quite figured that out. I don't know if he's figured out how to do, or I don't know if he's figured out what went into the move. So as soon as we get that going, as soon as we get him on, we'll do that and have a chat with him. But as we look at Manchester here, so far they're 5-4, 0-1 in their last 10 games. The Monarchs have kind of scuffled here of late, but they have gained some traction, and they have a big game coming up this weekend against the Adirondack Thunder. Joining us now from Southern New Hampshire, Josh Heisman. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
Good. Thanks very much for joining us on the trade deadline show. Your thoughts as you and I were as I was talking to get you on here. You and I were having a hard time figuring out what went into the move to bring Ashton Rome from Worcester back to Manchester. Have you been able to figure that out at all?
I have not found anything out as to why they would make that move. It's a move that didn't really seem to make sense for either team. You know, as you were talking to DJ, the Manchester is another one of those teams where they're looking for defense probably more than anything else. They traded away a defenseman to get Ashton Rome, who hasn't been healthy in Worcester for a while. It's very strange because, you know, Rome has history in Worcester. He lives in Worcester. They were building the team around him basically, and now something's gone wrong. I don't know if there was a personality conflict or, you know, at this point it would only be speculation. But as far as that trade goes, it's one that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for either team. I'm not really sure why they made it. I will say that this is the second year in a row that they've traded Augusta away. They traded him last March to Toledo Walleye. That's right. For Tyler Sakura and Chris Leone. Chris Leone on Cincinnati now. Tyler Sakura just signed a contract with the Blackhawks actually yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. As we were talking here, again, bringing you on, 5-4, 0-1 in their last 10 games. They temporarily lost their lead in the North, saw their lead all but get absorbed by Adirondack, and now these two teams have a huge showdown Friday night at Cool Insuring Arena in Glens Falls.
Correct. Yeah, that's the second lead that the Monarchs have sort of squandered. They had an 8-point lead after the end of December. They lost that in January. Wheeling caught up to them at that point. But the way this division has been, it's been so tight. Teams are coming in, falling out all the time. So it's it's one of those things where they're kind of in control of their own destiny. They play most of the games the rest of the season in division. A lot of those games are against Adirondack. So, you know, obviously Friday is going to be a big showdown for the Monarchs and the Thunder, and, you know, it's going to be a good leg up, but plenty of games left to play. It's really tight. I mean, as you were talking to DJ again, you know, even Wheeling is 3 points behind Reading after this morning, but I think you guys had 1, but it's actually 3. And, you know, even Worcester in 5th place isn't that far out. As, you know, the Monarchs had a 6-point lead after their winning streak, won on a big long streak and are a losing streak, and now they're only 1 point ahead of Adirondack. So 6 points between Wheeling and Worcester doesn't seem that insurmountable, to be perfectly honest with you. So, I mean, it's kind of a 5-team race right now. Any team could finish first. Any team could finish fourth.
Is this a conference that the Monarchs can win outright from Florida and South Carolina and have home ice throughout the Eastern Conference playoffs, or are the Monarchs just content to let South Carolina and Florida kind of duke it out for that top seed in the conference overall?
I mean, I'd hate to say that any team is content to let two teams duke anything out for first place in the conference, but the way the North is compared to the South, as far as competitiveness goes, I think they're going to focus on trying to win games in their division and worry about the rest of the conferences later. I think they could win the conference at this point. It's probably going to be a tough row to hoe. I'd rather see them focus on trying to stay in the division rather than go all the way, but they obviously want to win as many games as they can. But again, it's probably easier for Florida and South Carolina to hold their lead with their rest of their schedule than it would be for the Monarchs to catch up.
Tell us a little bit about Jordan Lavely Smotherman, who leads the team with 62 points and is up there with the league leaders in scoring. He looks like he's been the straw to stir the drink for the Monarchs this year.
Yeah, he came in as a veteran presence this year. He's tied for second in scoring in the league right now. Actually, last year he came back from Europe during the playoffs as a coach for the Monarchs and then signed on as a player for this season. I mean, he's really been a force. He's taken some of these young guys and really been a good partner for them. And I think that he's been, probably the most constant presence on the team. I mean, we've had a lot of guys that have been pretty solid scorers come and go. They've had a lot of call-ups to Springfield, Utica, not so much Ontario. We'll talk about that, but, they've had a lot of guys that have come out in scoring and then they go away and then another guy comes in. Recently Spencer Watson did come back. Actually, the one guy that's been going back and forth from Ontario, Spencer Watson, came back. He's been a pretty good scoring force for the team when he's been around. So, but yeah, Jordan Lavely Smotherman, I mean, you can't say enough about the guy. He makes the plays. He's pushing this team as hard as he can, I think.
Ultimately, in looking at the stats, just really quick here, because we have Jesse Liebman on from the Orlando Solar Bears. My final question for you. There's quite a disparity there between the power play at home versus away. At home, Manchester has one of the lowest power play percentages in the league at 12.8% overall. They score 18 more power play goals away from SNHU Arena than they do at home. What has been the biggest difference so far with how the power play has worked?
Well, I don't know. It's something I couldn't really say exactly because I haven't really spoken to anybody about it. But, this recent losing streak was all at home. They seem to have been playing better on the road this year. I don't know if it has to do with, Manchester's attendance issues. Maybe they don't feel the fans are getting behind the team. But, they've definitely played a lot better away this year than they have at home. So hopefully they can get that sorted out. They kind of struggled on the power play overall early on. They came into it in the middle. January was a bad month for the power play, but December was a really great month. So, I mean, they've kind of been up and down. But I think that, they've just maybe haven't had the support they wanted at home, and that could be a contributing factor.
All right, there you go. That is the view from the Great White North as they are getting unburied from 1.5 feet of snow.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Nice. Always nice to have a March snowfall.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's not rare to have a March snowfall up here, and it's funny as many people that are complaining about it because, I'm pretty sure last year we had snow in April, so, March snowfall isn't really that uncommon up here, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks very much to Josh for joining us on the Sin Bin Trade Deadline Show to give you the perspective for the ECHL North Division. As we've talked to DJ Abasilla and Josh Heisman in the North, we shift to the South now and talk to Jesse Liebman, who is the voice of the Orlando Solar Bears. As we sit here on deadline night, with the deadline now about 5 hours old, 5 hours past us, Orlando sits comfortably in third at 28-26, 5-1, 3 points above Atlanta, and having dropped a game to them just 1 night ago. Jesse, thanks very much for joining us. How are you, sir?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me aboard.
Good. Tell us a little bit about the move you guys made here on Thursday, picking up a kid from South Carolina for future considerations.
Absolutely. So it looks like the Solar Bears were active to an extent. They went out and grabbed Robbie Balergian from the Stingrays. So Balergian's a kid who played his college hockey at BU and then 1 year of as a grad student with Arizona State's team out west. So this year he was playing in his first pro season. To my knowledge, we saw glimpses of Balergian back in November when the Stingrays were in Orlando for a brief stretch, and then I believe he played a few games against us, I want to say in December or January, if my memory serves correct, but he was a guy that originally was in their top 6 among their forward pairings, and up through, I was just looking back at some of the numbers, up through late November, early December, he was their leading rookie scorer at the time. All the points that he had accrued, of course, were assists, but he was someone that factored in heavily in their offense. And then, to my knowledge, he sustained an injury at some point a little bit thereafterwards, around December, January, and afterwards he kind of struggled getting back into the lineup on a consistent basis for the Stingrays and developing that consistency. So for us, it was a chance to add a player who might have needed a change of scenery, and hopefully for the Solar Bears, it's something that pays dividends.
Kristen, you have a question? Hopefully.
Question is, can you hear me? We'll start there.
You're still faint. Oh,
Very, very faint. Can't hear much of anything.
sorry.
You both know I am not a faint talker. So, can you
Yeah.
answer a question, Jesse?
Yeah.
You may have to relay that through me. Play a little game of telephone.
We might.
Oh man.
So, let's do this. Kristen, there's a chat window on the other side. If you click the bar over there on the right side, up at the top, there's a chat window. Click that, open it, and get in the chat with me, and I'll relay your questions. Hopefully that works. So tell us a little bit, Jesse, about Drake Berehowski and the team he's built this year. You guys got off to a bit of a sluggish start, now crawling above 500, slowly but surely. Is this an Orlando Solar Bears team that can challenge Florida and South Carolina in the division playoffs moving into next month?
I would have to say so. I mean, you can never really count out any team in this particular division. It's something that I hear constantly from both media members, coaches that represent various teams within the division and outside the South. By its very nature, being in the southeastern United States, the warm weather, that's a very potent recruiting tool during the off season, and it makes it easy to attract some of the bigger name talents within the Premier AA level to the South, be it Orlando or Florida, South Carolina, etc. And as was the case last season, you had the number 4 seeded Orlando taking the Everblades to a 7th game series, at one point holding a 3-1 series lead. Were it not for a brawl that made headlines in Game 4, it's very possible if the outcome of that brawl goes a different way, you may have seen Orlando getting onto the second round. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case last year, but every single game, be it regular season or playoff contest within the South, always appears to be an absolute grudge match.
Yeah, definitely. And in the offseason, Berehowski went out and recruited Daryl Bootland, Sean Zimmerman, Sam Jardine, all from the Kelly Cup champion Colorado Eagles. Can you talk a little bit about the veteran addition to that team? He essentially overhauled the veteran core this year, plucking 3 from the Kelly Cup champions. As you mentioned, the warm weather's tough to say no to this time of the year.
Absolutely. In the case of Zimmerman and Bootland, they were known for being pretty good friends out in Colorado. When it became apparent that wasn't an option, I think Coach Berehowski and our associate head coach, John Snowden, they reached out. Snowden played frequently against Bootland and Zimmerman, was sometimes their teammate within the Central Hockey League and in the ECHL. So that was, I guess, an easy sell, for lack of a better term. And in the case of Jardine, he's a young talent. Originally, we signed him to an ECHL deal, but he did enough to impress the Toronto Marlies brass during training camp, where he was able to earn a American Hockey League contract for the season as well. So technically, he's considered property of the Marlies now, although we do have his ECHL rights. And he's been, after, as you said, the team itself kind of endured a slow start to the season. And gradually, the team has started to improve vastly since a very rough outing in October and early November, especially at home, where now the team is back above 500 on home ice as well as on the road.
Kristen asked Kristen said that, Orlando's in somewhat of a similar spot than Cincinnati, in that they're in 3rd place in the division, where the teams are ahead of them have around a 20-point gap collectively. what do the Solar Bears need to do to make it out of the division playoffs and challenge for a conference championship?
Well, it's to quote the late Al Davis, just keep winning, I guess, or I'm paraphrasing there, but with the Solar Bears having played 60 games already on the schedule, they've got 12 left. All of them are against divisional opponents. The best way that they can ensure that they not only get a playoff spot, but perhaps finish as high as third within the division is to just keep winning. They've got 2 games this weekend against Greenville, who has been on a slide as of late, unfortunately for them, but certainly the Solar Bears gain. They'll want to continue to get back on the winning track after falling 6-1 to Atlanta last night. That brought about an end to a season-high 5-game win streak. So certainly anything that they can do to pad their lead on Atlanta, who is nipping at their heels just 3 points back in 4th place. And certainly you can't overlook Norfolk, Jacksonville, or Greenville looking to play the role of spoiler by that extension.
Yeah, definitely. And you bring up a good point. Norfolk sitting 7 points behind Atlanta, 10 points behind you guys, and then Jacksonville the same way. What are we, for those of us who are not as plugged into the South Division as you might be, what are we missing about Norfolk and Jacksonville? We know the story on Greenville is that they haven't been able to play a whole lot of defense all year, and then they've missed now some of their leading scorers who helped them get off to that red-hot start. But what are we missing with Norfolk and Jacksonville that the rest of the league's not covering very well?
I think they're just 2 very scrappy teams that you can't overlook. Robbie Fatorik seems to be a pretty substantial motivator behind the bench for the Admirals, and certainly you can't overlook the all-time winningest coach in ECHL history, Jason Christie. I have a little bit of history with him. He was the head coach for the Ontario Reign when they were in the ECHL while I was there for my first 3 years of working in this league. And sure enough, earlier this week, Christie went out and traded with Quad City to bring in Kyle Bigos, a former player of his in Ontario. So they're both 2 very physical teams. Norfolk, I would say, trends more this season anyway towards a more skill side. They have players like Brody DuPont, Derek Angeli, who played last season in Orlando. Those are 2 very highly skilled guys. Jacksonville, they've certainly had their share of roster turnover this year as an affiliate of the Winnipeg Jets and the Manitoba Moose. There's been a lot of movement, in particular with their goaltenders. Colton Finney seems to have been yo-yoing up and down between the ECHL and the American Hockey League. But each of those teams certainly formidable in their own right. And although maybe their record perhaps isn't the best indicator, Jacksonville 7 games below 500, and the same can be said with Norfolk. Those are 2 very potent teams. Norfolk came into Orlando back in December and took all 3 games. Orlando was only to pick up 1 shootout loss point in 3 games during a December series. They fared a little bit better against Norfolk the second time around when they came down to our building just a few weeks ago. And, of course, the Solar Bears, they play Jacksonville the second-to-last home game of the regular season in a matter of weeks. I believe it's March the 29th that game is scheduled for, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, sounds good. It is going to be a dogfight there to get in to that 3rd and 4th spot. Actually, Kristen had one more question with Nolan Valou being recently sent down and now back up to the American League with Rockford. Do you expect to have him back there for the playoffs? If not, where will your defenseman, easy for me to say, where will your defenseman need to step up to close his gap?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. That's one of the beauties of the ECHL. Necessity sometimes dictates a lot of the strategy for a team. In the case of Orlando, the Solar Bears, I guess you could say maybe their secret weapon on the back end, at least in terms of solidifying depth, has been Kyle Rankin. He's a 2nd-year forward, spent last year with the Elmira Jackals. Played his college hockey at Princeton, and while he was at Princeton, he also did spend some time on defense. It was a few weeks ago, late February, while the Solar Bears were on the road, that Drake Berehowski, out of necessity, went to Kyle Rankin and said, "Hey, we need to put you on defense. We're short bodies for tonight." Rankin dropped back. He was paired with Sean Zimmerman and never really looked back for the next several weeks. Unfortunately, Valou did return at one point from a brief stint up in the American Hockey League, and so we were able to switch Rankin back to forward. But it wouldn't shock me at all if that being the case with Nolan Valou now back up with the Rockford Ice Hogs, the team that he started his pro career out for 2 seasons while a member of the Blackhawks organization, that we see Rankin maybe drop back on D. And of course, there's still some additions that can always be made with college free agency now coming into play. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we see maybe an addition of a player on an ATO, which is pretty commonplace around the ECHL and even the American Hockey League this time of year.
And you can still get defensemen coming down from Toronto, right? As they shore up their playoff roster, that there's always the chance that they can help you shore up yours, right?
I believe that is the case, yeah.
All right, sounds good. It is going to be fun times there in the city beautiful, Orlando, as the Solar Bears continue to make their push toward the Kelly Cup playoffs. Jesse Liebman, thank you very much for giving us a few minutes of your evening. Enjoy the hockey action this weekend and throughout the rest of the season. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
All right, thanks very much. There he goes, Jesse Liebman of the Orlando Solar Bears. I'm still working on getting Kristen her mic to work. I'm still working on it, and I feel awful about it. But unfortunately, I just can't. It. What's that?
There's nothing I can do on my end. You had something going before you had me get out and then get back into it with the other link. So, because I remember at one point it said Tinbin has turned up your audio. So, as far as I know, it's as high as it can be for me. I can talk louder if it's honestly necessary.
Let's try that.
Okay, that's what I saw last time.
There you go. You sound a lot.
Hey.
There's some audio. There we go. Okay, now we've got Kristen. Hey, it only took 45 minutes. You're gonna have to listen really hard, people.
Oh no, really?
Yeah. while we've been handling the show here for the last little while, what's been your impression here so far? Obviously, Orlando taking a fairly sizable hit with Nolan Valou, an ECHL All-Star. You and I both had a chance to see him here in Indianapolis a couple of months ago. Just overall, your thoughts on what you've heard so far.
Well, going back to Valou, I asked the question because he mentioned Valley started, as I know him, Valley started his career out in Rockford. His rookie season was my intern year with the Ice Hogs, and he didn't make much of a splash then. To be quite frank, I wasn't too surprised to see him in the ECHL the next year for at least a little bit. But his shot stood out significantly at ECHL All-Star. I believe it clocked in at about 95 miles per hour. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the hardest shot on record since they started doing that contest.
Yeah, I think so. It was 95 or 97 miles an hour. It was a very quick shot. But and the other thing that has kind of stood out to me is his presence on the power play so far this year for Orlando. If you look at their stats here so far this season with Valou in the lineup, he has 16 power play points. So half of his power play points have come on the blue line, or half of his points this year have come on the power play. So that tells me that they're probably going to be outside of Josh Winquist and Max Novak. They're really going to miss him on that blue line. They're on the power play.
We know is their fifth leading scorer with 30 points, 8 goals, 22 assists. So that's why I had to ask him, that is a strong presence for a D-man regardless. It's, right, again, not surprising he's making his way up to the A. Now, from my understanding, he does have inconsistency issues up there. So whether or not he clicks with the Ice Hogs, which is very probable, there's a new coach that he hasn't worked with before. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Valley back in time for playoffs for Orlando, God willing. They make it. I mean, that is a tough division. I kind of paralleled it to the Cyclones. Cyclones are only holding their third place lead by 6 points. I mean, with how much hockey there is to be played, it could be very probable that they could lose that spot. And Orlando is an even tougher spot. They're holding theirs by all 3 points. Yeah. So I'm glad I asked that because I wasn't familiar with the former Princeton forward who's with Orlando now, because like Jesse said, that is the beauty of the ECHL. You have kind of these diamonds in the rough that you don't expect. So I can't wait to see how Orlando works without Valley for right now and see how this forward turn defenseman works out for him. while he is up there.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to keep this train moving. Joining us now from the red dirt state of Oklahoma is Cameron Turner. How you doing, bud?
Good. How are you guys?
Good, thanks. You sound great, by the way.
Thank you.
Relief.
Much better than yesterday.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the Tulsa Oilers here. It did not make a move at the deadline and are sitting in fourth place right now as we move past the deadline and now start to push to the Kelly Cup playoffs. One scant point ahead of the Island Americans.
Yes, it's a very tight race in the Mountain. Utah's coming on strong behind them as well. The Oilers haven't made the playoffs since 13-14, their first year in the ECHL. But they seem to be in a good position. Devin Williams has been playing extremely well in net. And you're right, they did not make a trade at the deadline. They seem to be going with what they have. And they do have a good team. They've been playing really well recently. I thought they might try to add a little extra scoring at the deadline to pair up with Charlie Saint-Pierre. But I think that they are in a really good position. And, standing pat at the deadline might just be what they need. They have been playing really well. The chemistry is there.
Are you surprised that they didn't make a move for some more toughness, given the fact that Cale Kessie is now up in the American League with Chicago, and he was really the protector of Adam Pleskash and Charlie Saint-Pierre and Connor Bleakley when he was there, and all three of their games really improved while they had Cale Kessie in the lineup?
Yeah, that's a good point. Kessie, he is a really physical presence on the ice. He protects the players, like you said. I am a little bit surprised they didn't go after someone to try to bring in a little more depth, a little more physicality to protect the star players, like you said. With Bleakley and Kessie up in the AHL, it has been a little bit short and thin on the offensive end. And so having somebody come in who could have played the role Kessie played, provide the physicality, provide the protection, and chip in a little bit of offense too, that could have really helped a lot. I am a little bit surprised they didn't do that, but they do seem to have a good group, a good chemistry going right now, and so they are playing really well right now, trying to push on to the playoffs.
Kristen. Try that, Kristen.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, it's been an ongoing issue today.
Yes.
No problem.
Yeah, actually, I was figuring out my audio, so since all yours, Harding, sorry. I don't have.
Go ahead and ask a question if you want.
I would love to. No, honestly, I was working on the audio for so long. I was kind of enthralled in that while you're talking. But Cam, it's great to hear from you. What do you expect out of your team for the rest of the season going forward and after trade deadline?
It's great to be here. I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys as well. I expect them to push hard. And, like I said, it's been since 2013-14 since the playoffs have been in Tulsa. And they do seem to have a group this year that is capable of making it. Like Matt said, they are 1 point ahead of Allen at the moment. And I expect them to, be able to push hard. I do expect them to be one of the teams that makes the playoffs out of the Mountain in the end. They seem to have exactly what you need. Devin Williams in net provides them some stability at the back end, keeps them able to keep the puck out of the net. If they're able to find a little more secondary scoring, a little more depth scoring, I think that would be, great. That would probably make it almost a guarantee that they would be able to get up into the top four, maybe into the top three. But even as it is right now, the way they've been playing defensively, they do have, Charlie Saint-Pierre, Adam Pleskash, but I expect them to put it together to be able to play well, and I do expect them to make the playoffs.
You mentioned a few pieces of that puzzle, but if you could really solidify like three keys to make it into the playoffs and to be successful in the playoffs, what would you pinpoint those to be?
As I was saying, one of them would probably, the main one would be, getting the clutch scoring, finding the depth scoring. Like Charlie Saint-Pierre has put a lot of goals in this year, but they had a little bit of trouble recently being able to find that extra tally with players like Connor Bleakley up in the AHL. Another area would be being able like we had talked about earlier, to keep Pleskatch, keep Sampere from being attacked or being played physically by the defenders, by the opposing team, being able to keep them upright and keep them on the attack. And then the third thing is just not putting yourself in bad positions. Don't take a lot of bad penalties. Don't get hemmed in your own zone. Get the puck out when you get the opportunity and just play smart hockey. And I think if they do that, they've got the talent and the group that can make the playoffs.
Is the power play something that is of concern to Oilers as we sit here now? They have 34 of 239 on the power play, 14.2% efficiency, one of the lower power plays in the league, and then the penalty kill overall is not that great either. Is the special team going to be what is this organization's Achilles heel again?
It could be, and like you said, there it has been for a while. It seems like the power play unit has struggled to get going in Tulsa the last several years. Just never seemed to be able to find that key power play goal. And that is always key in hockey, especially as you get into the playoffs. Goaltending and special teams can become the biggest keys to advancing. So yes, special teams is going to be huge. Being able to find that power play goal that might give you the lead, and then on the penalty kill, like I said, not taking a bunch of penalties, not taking silly penalties. Don't put yourself in a bad spot, and get the puck out of the zone. But yeah, special teams will absolutely be key, and it is something they've struggled with in the past.
As just this season could have been a whole lot different had with the medical emergency that Rob Murray had in November. The team really seems to have rallied around him, and having come off that very long road trip earlier or during that road trip where that incident happened. Talk a little bit about how the team has solidified themselves around each other. They had a players only meeting here a few weeks back and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Like you said, back in November, there was a scary incident where Coach Murray collapsed on the bench during a game. He was taken to the hospital. They were able to get him taken care of. He was able to be released in the next morning, and he was all right. But it was definitely a scary incident, and the team, like you said, definitely rally around him. Coach Murray is one of those guys who can inspire you. He'll get you to run through a wall for him. Just the kind of guy that everybody wants to play for. And the team really did rally around him. They kind of pulled together as a group, and this chemistry that they've had, and to be able to play as one, they've really done a lot to be able to play for him, get on the ice, give the effort, and do what they need to do to support each other and to play the way he wants them to play. And like you said, they did have a players only meeting a few weeks ago. They had been struggling a little bit, had slipped down into fifth behind Allen by about 8 or 9 points, and they had that players only meeting and then went on a 5-0-1 streak in their next 6 and have been playing really well since then. The group seems to have come together. They have that leadership, the internal leadership with the players that allows you to come together as a group and pull everybody along, get everybody to work as one. And when that happens, special things can happen on the ice. And this definitely seems to be a team that has grown really close and around the situation with Coach Murray and then with the players only meeting.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we will watch what happens in Tulsa here as we head on down the stretch and into the playoffs. Cameron Turner, thank you very much for joining us as we have our dialogue with the Tulsa Oilers. Thanks very much, bud.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. From Tulsa, we move up to Southwest Michigan and talk with the voice of the Kalamazoo Wings, Joe Roberts. Kalamazoo now out of the playoff picture is on trade deadline day, 1 point behind the Kansas City Mavericks, not Missouri Mavericks. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Good. Thanks very much for jumping on here this evening. Tell us a little bit about the move that you guys had on Thursday, sending Charlie Vassaturo to Reading for future considerations. What went into the move?
It was a futures move, and Vass has been with the team for 3 years now, and the way things are shaping up with everybody healthy this time of year, it's one of those things where on paper he was right around the 8th defenseman or so, and so you could sort of classify that as too much of a good thing at some points in time, and so we decided that we would invest in our future by making a deal now. So that's what went into it. It's good for Vass. He's a great guy. He's actually from Sewell, New Jersey, which is just down the street from near Philly, so near Reading. So it's not a bad move for him, too, because he gets to go close and go back towards home.
Kristen, you got anything for Joe?
Joe, you're in a tough spot, kind of like we are. I know Cincinnati has recently gained quite a lead to hold on to that third-place spot in the Central Division. There's still plenty of time left. I know we faced you guys at least once or twice. What's it going to take for KZU to beat KC for that final spot?
All right, for starters, am I upside down? If I am, you can tell me.
You are.
Hi.
Much better.
I didn't know if that would work.
I don't see him at all.
So right now, I mean, I guess to answer your question is we're in a position that we want to be in. That is, we control our own destiny. We're 1 point back at Kansas City. We have 2 games at hand. So this time of year, if you're begging for people to give you favors just to get in, then you're probably not in the right frame of mind. Win your games, get into the playoffs. It's as easy as that. So we're in a situation where we can do that. So we need to go out. We need to win hockey games. And, this is the time of the year when streaks happen for better, for worse, for all sorts of different teams. So hopefully ours can get trending in the right direction. And like I said, the gap to Cincy is not probably as close as the Wings would like. But in the meantime, battling for that spot against Kansas City is all internal. We're not looking at what's going on out there.
Tell us a little bit about Justin Taylor. He's putting together quite a year for you guys. 48 points in 47 games with 27 goals on the year, and he earned a call-up earlier this year. Tell us a little bit about the leadership you're getting from number 93.
Tails is a great guy. He's in his 8th year of pro hockey. He's been with the Wings for all of those seasons, even the one in which he got traded to Trenton and then from Trenton to Idaho. So he's a great guy. He provides a lot for our team. Kalamazoo's home for him. He met his wife here. He has a kid here. His dogs are here. He has a house. He loves playing in Kalamazoo, and we love when he plays in Kalamazoo. Now he's at the point where he's climbing up our record books and top 3 in a lot of categories, and we're not talking about a couple of years. We're talking about nearly a half century. You're talking about Kalamazoo Wings hockey, which goes back to 1974. So you don't do that if you're not invested, and obviously if you're not skilled and productive. And his shot in the American League was cool because guys don't get the chance after a 7-year break from that league. It just doesn't happen. You don't get that opportunity when you're 29 and haven't been in the American League since 2010. So for him to get that opportunity was really, really neat. And I know he was appreciative of it. And of course, in typical Justin Taylor fashion, he scores a greasy doorstep goal in his first game that he was in the lineup. So he only played 2 games. I think he watched about 6 of them, but we're happy to have him back.
Yeah, for sure. Having chipped in 11 points on the power play with a shorthanded goal this year, I believe the shorthanded goal, if memory serves, came against Wichita.
Actually, no, it was the other night. It was an empty netter. We had 2 shorthanded goals. Yeah, it was in a win against man, they're blending together. We're 59 games into the process. I can't remember who's who anymore.
I'm right there with you, brother. Josh Pitt as well, putting together a very solid season for you guys, 44 points in 46 games. Talk a little bit about, including 12 power play goals. Half of his goals have come on the power play this year, and I believe that is among the league leaders. Tell us a little bit about number 19 there for you guys.
Yeah, unless Michael Jolie scored a power play goal for Colorado's only goal last night, then I think Pitter still does lead the league in power play goals. So, he's finding and he's showing off a little bit that he is indeed a goal scorer. At Western Michigan, he wasn't pouring them in maybe the way they wanted him to. I know he played some defense a little bit when he was at Western Michigan playing for Andy Murray. But in the meantime, it's nice that he's finding a scorer's touch. Watch out for him when he gets to that right side circle on the power play, because if you give him an inch, he'll take a yard. And usually his yards are multi-point games. So he's been fun to watch as well. The development's always cool when you get to watch these guys from their first year into their second year and then beyond. So it doesn't hurt that he's, he's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him. He's got a great personality on him, and you want good people to have good things happen to them. So he's one of those guys where that's an example.
Yeah, definitely. Kristen, you got another question for Joe?
Yeah, Joe, every team seems to have their unsung heroes. Who are some possibly overlooked guys for the Wings this season that have surprised you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we actually give out an unsung hero award every year at our end of the year award ceremony, which happens at our last regular season game of the year. So last year was Lane Scheidel, and he's always a guy that you talk about when it comes to that. He had 50 points last year, but he still flies under the radar. The guy's a workhorse, and I think there's unlimited value in that. And then you have some of these rookies that are very quietly putting together, 20, 25, 30-point seasons. JT Stangline out of Michigan State. He's in his rookie year. He's one of 11 players that we have with 30 or more points on the year. And there's something to be said about that. I mean, balance is huge. You want that balance, especially this time of year. So, you have these teams that wheel in these new faces, new personalities into the locker room in March. And, you look at it on paper and it might seem sexy in the moment, but what does that mean? These guys have been going through the grind since October together. So that's maybe part of the reason why you're not seeing that much movement out of Kalamazoo. But yeah, you have those guys who just very quietly, Lane Scheidel, JT Stangline, no one really notices them. But then all of a sudden you look at the end of the year and say, well, that guy had 40, 45, 50 points. It's always a pleasant surprise.
We talk about, well, I guess, this was something that we brought up with DJ earlier, and I'll ask you as well. Did it seem like Nick Bootman was in the market for a defenseman or a forward, or was he actively shaking trees on Thursday?
I'm not sure what can be said about that. I'm not sure I don't think at any point in time he was going to be the guy that you were going to see a blockbuster move out of. I think that right now, if you look at our defense, we have Ben Wilson, who's our captain, and Mackenzie Stewart playing together, who's an affiliated player who's on a Vancouver Canucks contract. Defensively, they are probably our best shutdown pairing. And then you have Kyle Bushy and Eric Catalyst who play together, and those guys are very, very steadily putting up points on a nightly basis. So offensively, they're our best group. And then you look at the third pairing, which is a little more of that greasy, grimy, gritty bunch, which is Sean O'Rourke and Anton Cederholm, another Vancouver Canucks prospect. So, I'm not really sure where the wiggle room was. So you don't want to give up assets like Wilson and Catalyst and Bushy. Those guys are far too valuable. So I never thought that the intention was to make a splash. But yeah, like you said, everybody seems to be in the market for defense. It's just the way it goes. It's this time of year too. It seems like there's so much movement, January, February, March, that, it's almost like some teams are never satisfied. So, I'm not sure if he was an active shopper, to be honest, but from the surface, from my seat, it looked like he wanted to make some moves to set the tone for moving forward.
Yeah. Definitely. Kristen, you got any final questions here for Joe? I'm
good. Thanks for coming on, Joe.
Well, it's my pleasure. Always nice to join up with you guys this time of year. So I had fun at 5:00 when I was with David Fine of Reading, who was putting out, we were putting out the joint press release of Vassaduro getting traded to Reading. And then all of a sudden my phone just started going bzz, 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 and it's 5:00 and everybody's announcing their moves. So, it's always fun this time of year, and you guys are doing a great job bringing some exposure to it. So it's fun to watch the trade deadline. There's always a lot of good moves. So keep up the good work, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you
so much, Joe, for doing this, and all the best to you and the Kalamazoo Wings down the stretch here. Hopefully you guys get
in. Go Wings. We're coming to get you, Kristen. You're in Cincinnati.
Sorry. See you in the playoffs.
Maybe, yeah, hopefully.
In your case, I hope so. You're welcome.
See you guys. Thanks.
All right, there he goes. Joe Roberts from the Kalamazoo Wings, as he's always fun to talk to.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, whether it's deadline day or you're just where you're just at the arena having just a casual chat. Little known fact about Joe, huge fan of Toto. I love Toto. And so I'm in there doing an interview with him before the pregame show, before our pregame show here in Wichita. And Africa comes on and he's like, stop, we have to listen to this. And so he and I jam out for 3.5 minutes with Toto. So that's a pretty cool guy who can do that. So the league is lucky to have a guy like Joe Roberts calling games.
He's a big music guy. He was in Cincinnati not too long ago, and he roasted me when I asked him what a certain song was. It was so random. I don't think I'd ever heard it before in US Bank Arena, and sure enough, I'm just kind of like looking around like, what is this? Like, I don't get it. And he looks down at me just completely amazed. And then he goes on and on about his karaoke song, which is something super old school that I think I've heard of. I don't know. But no, you're right. He's a great guy to have around the league. Just a good personality, someone who makes everyone feel welcome, even if it's not his barn.
Yeah, definitely.
So knowledgeable, great personality. The league's lucky to have him while they do.
Yes, for sure. So final few minutes here as we are starting to close up shop on the Sinbin trade deadline show. I guess if we were to do a podcast, what would you title this? Would this be Comedy of Errors or what? I don't know. I don't know. The boss is in. It's just not trade deadline if we don't get the boss on the show. So how you doing, bud?
I'm good, man. It was kind of a snooze fest of a day for a deadline day. I was thinking back to last year and how crazy it was, and we had Roscoe on, and we had tons of deals to talk about, and so many teams got better, and this year I think we were all kind of just sitting around waiting for the hammer to drop, and it never happened.
It was the day I took off work, like but it was. I kind of had the feeling in my mind that if you go to the rink at 10:30 in the morning and you can knock at 10 o'clock in the morning and you can knock out 2 interviews and be home in an hour and a half and your phone not go nuts with notifications about trades, then it's a fairly slow day. And I kind of had the inclination when we saw the wave of moves on Tuesday with Quad City doing most of their offloading Tuesday.
Yeah.
That we would see it be kind of a slow day on Thursday, which is what we had, half as many trades today as there was a year ago.
Yeah, and we saw a little bit of that last year too with some deals, leading up to the deadline. And I expected some of that again this year, but even the those kind of lead up trades and the 10 to 14 days leading up to the deadline really I guess I was expecting a lot more activity than what we saw. But then again, realistically, you've got 23 of the 27 teams in the league really still have a legitimate shot of making the playoffs. So there's only so much picking to do from the other teams, and nobody really wants to put themselves in a position where they a move backfires on them. So with so many teams still in play, I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that we didn't see anything major or drastic today.
Well, let's talk about quickly the Kansas City Mavericks having picked up CJ Ike from Utah for future considerations. Ike, who started the season as the captain of the Grizzlies, and then you guys make another sizable trade that is paid dividends almost immediately, picking up Corey DeRocher from Idaho.
Yeah, a couple under the radar moves when they happened, but really 2 guys that have fit in very well. Ike is a guy that is a high motor, not a very big guy by any means, always one of the smaller guys on the ice, but he's everywhere. He's all over the place and never stops. He's quick to the puck. He's a forecheck. Hasn't done a lot on the score sheet, but has really helped this team since arriving in Kansas City. And Corey DeRocher has been a revelation. He's scored some big goals in some big situations for this team. and has really stepped in as a top 6 guy. That has probably been, the best move that John Scott Dixon has made this year.
And then you guys got Darren Noack back from Stockton ahead of last night's game with Colorado, and that was a huge addition to the lineup as well. Yeah,
Noack is just such a dynamic player. While his stay in Kansas City isn't expected to be long, anytime they can get him down here, he's such a good locker room guy. He's played with so many of the guys that are here that he just hits the ground running every time he comes back. So, when he's here, he's one of the top forwards in the league. He's got incredible speed. His hands are really have grown over the last 12 months. He was always a little bit raw with the puck on his stick, but he's really developed into a top flight forward. And you can see every time he comes back, just some of the things he's been working on, the little improvements that he's made just from the beginning of this season.
What is with the constant goaltender carousel between Tyler Parsons and of course, because I have you on, I'm gonna whiff on the other
Mason McDonald. Yeah.
Thank you. What's the constant rigmarole between those two going to Kansas City and Stockton now? Both, I think one of them's up there right now, and then you have Adam Carlson in Kansas City. What's the thinking behind having them continuously be on the move from Kansas City to California?
Well, the thinking is that, one, it started as they wanted Parsons to get as much playing time as possible. Obviously, being the top prospect in the Flames organization, they want him to play. There were some stints that Stockton had 3, 4, 5, 6 days off, even at times. So they would send Parsons down to get some more pucks. And frankly, Mason McDonald just earned the opportunity. He's been incredible for the Mavericks. He had a couple of bad starts earlier in the season that make his numbers look not so great, but he's been almost every bit as good as Tyler Parsons has been. And Parsons, you can see why he is that top prospect. He's got incredible talent, just needs experience, needs to refine a few things, and just needs to get better. But he is an incredible talent. And Mason McDonald, everyone forgets that Mason McDonald was a 2nd-round pick. I mean, it's another guy that is a highly touted prospect. So what started as kind of just rotating those guys in and out to make sure they were getting, maximum playing time has ended up, through some moves that were made and some injuries in the Flames organization. They're now both up in Stockton, and good for them. Hopefully they stay there and continue to progress throughout the organization.
I'll go ahead and open it up here, Kristen or Cece, if you guys have any questions for Joe. I'll open up the floor.
Joe, I got to talk to you. You're right there with us in the Central Division. You guys are currently holding the 4th spot by 1 point over the Kalamazoo Wings. You touched on some positives of the Mavericks game so far this year, but as you progress into hopefully clinching that final spot, what are some improvements that you believe need to be made, and what are some highlights of their game that's keeping them currently in that 4th position?
Some improvements that need to be made. The penalty kill has been terrible, which is weird for a Mavericks team. Normally, the PK has been kind of the backbone of this team over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So to see the power play be as successful as it has been, and the PK struggle is something that is new to the Mavericks organization, but it's been better as of late. So, signs of progress. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, Bryce Anilowski is starting to play the best hockey of the season. He's really had, not a Bryce Anilowski type year. I think he's put a lot of pressure on himself and has forced a lot of things upon himself that he didn't need to. And I think now he's just finally getting to the point where he's simplified his game. And the last 2 weeks has been his best 2 weeks of hockey all season. So it's not a coincidence that the PK is starting to get better as Anilowski starts to figure things out there on the back end. One of the highlights you asked about, it's tough to call it a highlight. It's a highlight right now because of the last 6 games, but the Mavericks seem to have played to the level of their competition. Whether it be up or down, honestly. I mean, they've won 5 of their last 6. Those 5 wins, 2 against Allen, 2 against Fort Wayne, 1 against Colorado. I mean, those are 3 really talented teams in the ECHL. That 1 loss against Rapid City. They've had struggles against Quad City. They've had struggles against Indy. So they seem to elevate their game when playing some of the better teams in the league, and seem to kind of keep their foot off the gas against some of the teams that have struggled this year. And it's really come back to hurt them. You know, I was listening to Joe Roberts earlier, and he was talking about how Kalamazoo controls their own destiny, and he's absolutely 100% correct. I think if the Mavericks could switch places with Kalamazoo, they would in a heartbeat. Those 2 games in hand are going to be huge down the stretch, and the Mavericks are going to need some help from some other teams. You know, Cincinnati the same way. They're trying to catch Cincinnati for that 3 spot, 6 points back, but Cincinnati has 3 games in hand. So, you know, some of those games that have slipped away from the Mavericks could end up costing them when this thing's all said and done.
You know, Joe.
Go ahead. Sorry, Kristen. Go ahead.
You know, just from my personal understanding, you know, everyone's been pretty familiar with my background in baseball. And one thing I haven't entirely been able to grasp in parallel with hockey is, you know, for us in softball, baseball, we always played down. It didn't matter how good we were. 7th in the nation, still playing like, you know, the 2030 team in the nation that we're playing against and getting beat. Mm-hmm. What does that come down to in hockey? Like, why do such great teams fall to teams that are statistically so inferior to them?
You know, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that some of the leaders on this team are sitting up in the press box right now. I mean, when Rocco Carzo went down for the year, that was such a gut punch for this organization that took them a while to get past, honestly. And you know, I mentioned Anilowski had his struggles and was trying to get some things sorted out. And you know, Tyler Elbrecht is a guy who's a veteran guy and a great presence, but he can only do so much. And you've got a young team, you know, most of the season kind of plugged with fill-in SPHL players who have been great, not to say anything poorly about them. Danny Smith, John Schiavo, Nick Miglio was great when he was here. Maverick Parks has been incredible since coming up. But, you know, a lot of roster turnover and a lot of young guys, and some of the most important guys at the beginning of the season on this roster are either gone or injured. And I think there's such a huge mental aspect to that, to where the coaching staff can only do so much preparation and so much work to get these guys ready to play. But when it comes down to it, when skates hit the ice, it's on those players to be mentally prepared for that game. And I think it's easy to look ahead and see a team like Rapid City and just think, oh, you know, we're a better team than them. Let's just go out and play and we're going to win. And that's not the case. It's professional hockey. I mean, the guys across the ice, regardless of the record or the points in the standings that they have, are professional hockey players. And you can't just go out there and expect to win. You know, there's a great line in you know, a movie that I'm sure that we all love, in Miracle, where Herb Brooks says, you know, you think you can win on talent alone, and he says, you know, you don't have enough talent to win on talent alone. And you know, not to say that the Mavericks aren't a talented team, but they can't have that mindset where they can just step out on the ice and expect to come home with 2 points.
Cece, let's talk about you and bring you in on this. The Idaho Steelheads in kind of a move that I thought, having watched them Friday and Sunday against Wichita, made sense. And Joe will get to see them here later this week as Missouri travels up to Idaho. But they pick up a kid in Jack Nevins who has 20 points and 120 PIMs on the year, and they're really expecting him to kind of fill that power forward role along with Jefferson Dahl and add a little bit more size up front. Tell us a little bit about that move.
Well, the Idaho Steelheads, they sustained a big loss when they lost Mitch Mraz back in December. He had just gotten done with a fight, and he kind of took a freak fall when the referee stepped in to break up that fight. And so, you know, we have a good grinder, we have a good enforcer in our defenseman Zach Bell, but to have kind of that power forward, like you mentioned, it's been something that we've been missing since Mraz went down with the injury. So to pick up a kid like Jack Nevins is just it fills a huge gap for the Steelheads.
And for those of us who are not familiar, or for those of you who are not familiar with Jack Nevins, again, this is a kid who put up, I think, 140 or 150 PIMs last year with the Quad City Mallards, and was a real difference maker for them up front last year with the with the Quad City Mallards, and so far this year has kind of gotten lost in the muck and the mire of the Greenville Swamp Rabbits and their downturn. Good to see him get on a playoff roster here this year. Idaho, as we sit here at the deadline, CC, a fairly decent team led by Jefferson Dahl with 56 points on the campaign. They're 11-9-2 in their last 21 or 22 games. They look like they are in a fairly decent position now, much like they were last year, to get locked into either a 2 or 3 seed. Now 5 points up on Wichita, but 8 back of Colorado. CC,
sorry, what was your question?
Just talking, having you discuss the playoff standings and where Idaho fit in the middle there now. 5 points up on Wichita, but 8 back of Colorado. Is obviously the division still up for grabs with Colorado losing last night to Kansas City, but obviously it would be a much more different story had Idaho not won those 5 out of 6 games against the Eagles earlier in February.
Yeah, I mean, to go into the Budweiser Event Center in Loveland, Colorado, and to take not 1, not 2, but 3 road games from Colorado, I think that was a huge thing for Idaho, because last year Idaho did get bounced by Colorado in 5 games, and they showed that at least last year they couldn't get it done on the road. And so to go into Colorado and to get that done, and to take 5 of 6 games in the Super Series, to play 3 in Colorado and to play 3 in Idaho, I think that really showed that Idaho is definitely a serious playoff contender this year. And they're gonna, whoever the draw may be at the 3 seed or the 4 seed, I think Idaho has definitely proven that they can get it done on the road, and their home record shows that as well. With Idaho being, actually a little bit better on the road than at home, but yeah, I think the Steelheads, they have more of they can go the distance in the playoffs this year, I believe.
Kristen, you got anything for CC?
Hey, Cece, how are you?
Hey, Kristen, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent.
Cece, you've pointed out a few things about their game, but I'm very curious to know, what do you think has ultimately been the most impressive part of the Steelheads game? Who have been some standouts, better yet, that maybe you wouldn't have had expected at the beginning of the season, whether it's rookies, vets, or may have you?
Well, I think first and foremost, you got to witness him firsthand at the All-Star game, Kristen. Justin Parizek. His wrist shot is second to none. It's something that it's a thing of beauty, and it shows up on the score sheet as well. I mean, the last time I checked, he had 26 goals and 26 assists. So it goes to show that he's not just a scorer, but he's also a playmaker. He just generates a whole bunch of plays. On the line with Stephen McParland. Steve McParland's another quick guy that the Steelheads have had, and it shows up on the score sheet as well. Matthew mentioned our captain, Jefferson Dahl, leading the way with 56 points. And yeah, those 3 guys have been solid this year. But Coach Neil Graham, something that he's been telling me all season long in interviews is that depth is really key for the Steelheads, because as you guys know, in the ECHL, people are constantly getting called up and recalled and getting tryouts with AHL teams and things like that. And so to have a deep roster, I mean, look at the goalie situation. Philippe DeRosier, he's our starter, but if somebody gets injured in the NHL like Ben Bishop did, Mike McKenna got called up to the NHL from the Texas Stars, and then DeRosier gets called up from the Idaho Steelheads to go to the Texas Stars, and so that kind of leaves Idaho in a bit of a lurch. And so the acquisitions of Thomas Scholl from Adirondack, and then signing this kid Michael Bitzer from Bemidji State University in upstate Minnesota, it's just a surprise to me how Coach Graham can continue to roll with the punches, if you will, and just continue to add to the depth and the speed of this team. That's another thing that sticks out, is how fast this team really is.
Yeah, definitely. I got to watch that in person on Friday night when Idaho came into Intrust Bank Arena and did whatever they wanted against the Wichita Thunder for 60 full minutes. And that is to see a big mobile defense and a smaller to biggish up front and be able to move the way that they move was something to behold. I thought Idaho is the quickest team that I've seen in Trust Bank Arena all year long. So Neil Graham has done something very, very good up there in Idaho. But that will be, if Wichita and Idaho play in a playoff series, buckle up, because that's going to be a very intense series, I have a feeling.
For sure. I agree wholeheartedly.
So let's go ahead and open it up, the discussion here, and we'll talk about each of our teams. I know Kristen had started to talk about Cincinnati earlier when we were having the audio problems, and we're going to go a little long on this since I did not give her the proper platform. We're going to go longer than 8 o'clock Central Time. So, Kristen, tell us a little bit about the Cincinnati Cyclones. They got Brock Bukaboom, son of Jeff Bukaboom, at the deadline a few hours ago. Tell us a little bit more about the Cincinnati Cyclones so far this season.
I can't say that I'm surprised at all that we picked up a defenseman. We're honestly in desperate need of one. Desperate actually might be kind of stretching it a little bit. But Eric Knodl's our top guy, and I'm not saying he's going to get called up, but there's always that possibility, especially after what went down today with 2 of our 3 remaining Rochester signed forwards going up to the A. You just kind of can't count on anything. So having Bukaboom, and we'll see what he does. I'm hopeful. Mac got a hold of him. I trust Coach Mac wholeheartedly. Hopefully he produces for us. Our blue line has no doubt needed a little bit of extra spunk in it, so to speak. Although I have been really impressed with a couple guys recently. Chris Leone, he's always someone to watch. Knodl, of course. And Anthony Florentino, I have to say, really surprised me. He has a shot from the blue line, and I'll compare him to a former Cyclone. He was signed by the Panthers, I believe, at least he was there during my intern year, 2014-15. Josh McFadden, and this guy, I think I saw him score no less than half a dozen goals just off a left or right circle face-off, just an absolute bullet of a shot. And Florentino has that power, and I'm excited to see that shot hopefully progress. But more than anything, that focus for the Cyclones this year has been the forwards. It was, I wouldn't say a rough start necessarily, but you had like 2-3 key guys that everyone's watching. You had Justin Danforth. Jesse Schultz continues to absolutely blow it up. The fact that he hasn't had a call-up, maybe it's an age thing, I can't say, but it's a possibility there. He's been tearing it up. And the thing I have to say I've been so impressed with this team as of late is that everyone's stepping up. Yes, it's a blow that we're losing Kyle and Karabacek. Some would argue that it's definitely more of a hurt that we're losing Kyle, but since he came back from his concussion, Karabacek, he's been a lot of good muscle that we need out there. I wouldn't put him on the same pedestal as McNally, who anybody who watches Brandon McNally play, no, the guy is quick, he's a hard hitter, and Karabacek is right around that same line. But we have guys stepping up left and right, so I'm confident in that piece. Winston Daychief, he recently had a hat trick. Justin Vibe is always someone to watch, both muscle, physically, and his scoring power. So I'm interested to see what happens as we head into the final bit of the season. Tomorrow we play in Indy, and Indy, it doesn't matter where they are in the standings. They've had the Cyclones number all year. We have won all of one game against them all year. So tomorrow is going to be a huge, huge, huge night in Indy for both teams. Indy is now 2 spots out of playoff contention, but as we've been saying all night, especially in the Central Division, there's still plenty of time to catch up. And of course, on top of that, it should definitely be said, it is Nick Sports Night or whatever they're calling it, but it's SpongeBob Night in Indy. So we're gonna see a big game played against guys in board shorts, essentially. But at the end of it all, I really am excited to see what comes out of this move, with the lack of Kyle and Karabacek and with the addition of Bukaboom, who I assume will be in tomorrow, at least I hope. And of course, we could always get guys from Rochester, which honestly I'm not expecting anytime soon. Talking with guys up there, Let's Go Amerks. I have to give him a huge bit of credit here. I talk to him on a fairly regular basis. He's always the one giving me the no in Rochester. They have 10 injured guys right now, and that's just their roster. That's not even counting who's hurt in Buffalo and what's going on up there that's causing those roster moves. Cyclones have, 5, 6 forwards that are within the Rochester and Buffalo organization who are currently up. The only forward we have left is Bryson Martin, which isn't a bad thing by any means, but just to give you an idea of how many stronger guys, in theory, that we are without right now. So as we head into this weekend we have a 3-3. It goes Indy, Fort Wayne, and then they're heading up to Brampton. It's not an easy schedule. I'm excited to see what happens. I think it will give a good outlook into what the playoffs, what this team looks like. Sorry, let me start that again. I think this will give us a good window into what to expect, saying this team does make it into the playoffs, which we're in a pretty comfortable spot right now. But, nothing too comfortable. I don't think anybody should, unless you're in the top 2 in the Central and forgetting the other division right now, forgive me. Mountain, thank you. Unless you're one of the top 2 teams in the Central or Mountain, you really can't be too comfortable if you're in a 3 or 4 spot. So I'm excited to see what the team has this weekend. I think it'll give us a lot of insight into what's to come in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I've had a chance to see Cincinnati a couple of times here so far this year against Wichita, and again, the thing that bothers me about Cincinnati, Kristen, is the power play is red hot, and then the penalty kill is one of the worst in the league. Have you been able to ask Matt McDonald what the rhyme or reason is for that?
I have not had the opportunity to talk to Coach Mack,
or ever for that matter.
We haven't really had the opportunity to talk. Definitely not to Mac, but for the reason behind the penalty kill, I don't know. I know having such a low penalty kill against Indy will bite us in the butt. In all but one game, Indy has scored a power play goal against us, which I think has definitely been something that's hurt us in every game against them. Again, like I said, up until our last contest against them, we hadn't won a single game. And all of those losses, one of the 2 overtime losses Cincinnati has had all season, which that's something I have to give to this team. You send them into overtime, you better count your blessings because they're going to come in firing. Whether it's overtime or shootout, that team is good. They've lost twice in overtime. Once was at the very beginning of the season, literally first puck drop of the season at home against Kalamazoo on October 14th. And then another was a few weeks later, I believe, against Indy as well. So penalty kill, I don't have an answer for that. I wish I did, but this team has proven that they can beat Indy, and every single point counts right now, especially if that's going to create greater separation between a team that's in contention for that 4th spot.
Yeah, definitely. And we're seeing that now here in Wichita as well with them not being as comfortable with 4th, as they're 5 points up on Tulsa, but Tulsa's only got 1 point ahead of a hard-charging Allen and Utah team. The Thunder picking up Nolan Dakota on Thursday, also Braden Lowe from the Quad City Mallards on Tuesday to pluck. And this is the second time this year that Malcolm Cameron has done this, to pluck a team's leading scorer and bring them over to join the Wichita Thunder has been nothing short of miraculous. And he only gave up Nick Bly and futures and cash to get both Braden Lowe and Nolan Dakota. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Wichita Thunder headed down the stretch. I know there's some angst over Joel Rumpel being let go or shipped off to Utah, but 2 contract goalies there for the Thunder here. So obviously there's really no place for Rumpel to go there. I'm open this up to everybody here in our final few moments. Hopefully we won't go too much longer, but if we do, that's just the 4 of us. Winners and losers here from the deadline, and I'll ask for 2 of them here as we move on. Kristen and I talked about this earlier, and I'll lead off. I think for me, the winners here are Florida and Utah. For me, Florida gets two proven scores in the lineup, and Utah got younger and really didn't miss a beat with Joel Rumpel. Like they are 8-0-0-1, undefeated in their last 9, and they got off the mat and are challenging Allen and Tulsa for that final playoff spot. So, so for me, Florida and Utah win the deadline period.
Yeah, I mean, with such a lack of activity, I mean, there isn't really a lot to say about winners, but I agree on the Florida aspect. I think that's a team that already does such a great job of defending their own cage and keeping pucks out of their own zone. To be able to add a guy like Sam Morning just makes a scary team that much more scary. They've got some dependable guys on the back end and really have no issues putting the puck in the net. So to add a talent like Sam Warning to the mix, a guy who has proven to be one of the better goal scorers at this level, to me, as of right now, that makes Florida the team to beat.
Clearly. Anybody else want to jump in here?
Yeah, I was gonna make a mention of Quad City. Anna, the gal who covers Quad City for the Sin Bin, she made a prediction saying that Quad City wasn't going to do any movement at the deadline, and yet here we are. Didn't they complete 4 or 5 trades before our deadline today? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Quad City completed 6.
6. Wow.
Yeah. So the thought here with that is Phil Axtell doesn't have a contract for next year. And if you don't know that you're going to be back for next year, you have to kind of build your roster like you're going to be. So I think that he kind of chipped in. He kind of called the season what it was. They're not going to contend. So you got to go out and you got to kind of sell off what you thought, what assets you have. And I'm surprised we didn't see any more out of that from Greenville here through this period. But honestly, I thought, not knowing what the futures are, I thought that Phil Axtell got some decent return for it. Nick Bly had a fairly decent night last night against the Wichita Thunder, his former team. And, he ended up getting he completed the trade with Chris Francis. He shipped him off to Orlando for Tristan King. Travis Armstrong is a big, linky forward defenseman kind of guy who has a fairly hard shot. So that's a guy who I think he can move forward with. Connor Riley, you ship out Tristan King essentially for Connor Riley, who has a motor on him. And then move out a couple more guys, Braden Lowe and Sam Warning, Kyle Bigos as well. So at this level, it's not always going to be a 1-for-1 deal. It'll be a 1 for maybe 2 in a futures or something like that. I'm actually pretty impressed with the return that that Phil Axtell got for the players that he had. I don't think the storylines are done yet in Quad City, especially with the fact that Phil Axtell may not be the coach there next year, and the owner, Jordan Melville, continues to look at that team very intensely from the top down and try to negotiate a lease with the Tax Slayer Center. So the storylines are not done there by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but that's a great point by Cece, and I give a lot of credit to Phil Axtell too, who, by the way, I feel like will not be back in Quad City whatsoever. But it's just me.
I agree, and let's just say this: unfortunately for Phil, because he had such a really good year last year, taking over after Terry Ruskowski got fired, advantage us. After that happened, he took Terry's team and went to the playoffs and unfortunately lost in, I think, 5 games to Fort Wayne. But that 12, 13, 14 game losing streak where it just came completely unhinged from the locker room out is not a good look for a coach.
No, and it's not one that he'll survive. But CC makes a good point. I mean, the fact that he made some great decisions here and unloaded some talent to make this a quick turnaround, hopefully for Quad City. We saw a lot of that in Richard Mapachuk's for here in Kansas City, where he flipped anything he could for futures that turned into some key contributors, guys like Rocco Carzo, David DeCastroza, for the following year for that team that won the Brabham Cup. So, fans may not like it, but they should. Obviously, this season hasn't gone the way anyone, in Moline had hoped. And this season is effectively over for the Mallards. So you start looking ahead to next season and what you can do to right the ship. And I think what Phil Axtell was able to pull off is a huge step in getting things back on the tracks in Moline.
Definitely. Kristen?
I was a little bit surprised by Quad City, but after the points you made, it does make sense to me. I have to agree with Joe. Like, Florida definitely won. I don't know about clear losers. I can speak more on Cincinnati, and of course, I'm not very surprised by their move. I guess, if anything, I expected a little bit more from the teams that are flirting with the middle right now on a playoff spot or not. I would have expected maybe not a ton, but a few more moves to be made, just to rather it's to solidify their spot where they're at, or to get up to a playoff spot. But also, I know especially Cyclones have to think about, you're at the mercy of your affiliations if you have one. Of course, is your best option to trade someone? Is your best option to pick up a college guy who's either already done or about to be done in the next few weeks? I know NCHC, so Miami University's playoffs, they start this weekend. Hey, go Red Hawks. So, I was going to throw that in eventually.
Yep.
Let's go Hawks. They're going up against St. Cloud State this weekend. But, the ECAC, they've started up. So, while it was quiet, in my opinion, I'm excited to see. I think Joe said it before. There's still, one of you guys said it, there's still a lot of movement to be made with college guys and whatnot. So I'm excited to see the storyline progress. But as far as trades go, yeah, it was a lot more quiet than I expected. Again, on the Cyclones end, the most exciting part, essentially, exciting depending on how you want to look at it, is Karabacek and Kyle's recall.
Matt, and on the loser side of things, and this is something that I kind of wanted to defer to you on. I was a little puzzled by the move of Adirondack making for Kenton Miller. Kenton Miller's a terrific player. You and I both seen it. He's a two-time 30-goal scorer at the AA level. But scoring goals has been an issue for Adirondack this year. To me, it seems like they've decided that they're going to try to win a shootout against Manchester if and when they face off against the Monarchs. But to me, in that division, I would have expected maybe a little more push toward shoring up the back end than going out and getting another forward for Adirondack. So that was one of the things that stood out to me as a little puzzling.
Yeah, I thought so too. But the move that we've not talked about here, and we've not done a service of doing, and I think we probably should now, is Toledo sending their leading scorer Eric Bradford to Brampton for Jamie Dornbosch. Advantage Brampton on that all day long. Dornbosch is a great player on the power play. He leaves a lot to be desired on defense. Having watched him for a season and a quarter here in Wichita, he never fit into Malcolm Cameron's game, and I struggle to find a way for him to fit in Dan Watson's high impact, up tempo system that they play in Wheeling. I wonder in Toledo, I wonder if Dan Watson didn't give up too much in Eric Bradford to get probably a 4th, 5th defenseman in Jamie Dornbosch.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that real quick. I will totally take that move.
You would take Dornbosch over Bradford?
Oh, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying from a biased Cincinnati end. Hey, Toledo is locked down their spot. They're good, but we still have to face them, and we make it to the playoffs. I'm talking as if I'm part of the Cyclones, but Cincinnati makes it to the playoffs and has to face them. No, I am all for this move. It might not be the most logical one to everyone else's perspective, but from a bias point, I love it. I'll take it. I hope it works out in Cincinnati and the rest of the Central Division's favor.
No, man. I mean, that's a good point on Dornbush, and obviously, I haven't seen as much of him as you have, but I've seen quite a bit with Kansas City and Wichita being in the same division last year. For a team like Toledo that stresses responsibility and reliability in the defensive end, it's not Jamie Dornbush. Like, you know what I mean? And I kind of overlooked this too until you brought it up, but it was one of those things that kind of just made you scratch your head. I mean, I know that Toledo's was also good offensively, but to pick up a guy like Dornbush that kind of goes against the fiber of your team. Right. You're absolutely right that it is something that a little bit of a head scratcher.
All of a sudden, don't look now, but Christian Hilbrich is your leading scorer with 38 points.
Yeah,
that's scary. And for it to that to me, what this move indicates to me is one of two things. One, they are girding. They're going to get offensive players coming from Grand Rapids, or two, that they are confident enough in Makovsky and Pat Nagel in the defense on the back end with Dornbush that they don't need to go score 4, 5, and 6 goals in a playoff game. They just need to play really tight, solid defense and have really great goaltending, and that's going to be the MO that gets them to the championship this year. We saw it with South Carolina last year, and we saw it with Toledo even last year. Good luck making it out of the Western Conference when you have to play a Colorado, an Allen, an Idaho, or potentially a Wichita on the other side. Big physical teams who can wear you down and rack up the PIMs.
Joe, I was going to make a comment about Corey Durocher. I attested to Idaho's depth earlier, but the fact that, Durocher kind of got lost in the shuffle and Kansas City was able to pick him up for futures, and to be able to see him, be able to let his wings, and just open up his wings and just go for it. And to see him scoring goal after goal after goal in the Twitter feed, it's just, it's really, it's just a good pickup by Kansas City. Just a quick little caveat there for you, Joe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mentioned it earlier that's the best move that John Scott Dixon has made this year. When the trade went down, it kind of flew under the radar, but he's been arguably the Mavericks' best player, not named Sean Pauley, over the last few weeks. He's played on multiple different lines and really has kind of hit the ground running. I think the first couple of games he was, kind of getting a feel for what his role is. And I think at some point, Dixon and Kyle Hood just said, hey, just go out there and play your game and do your thing. And he looks relaxed. He looks comfortable. He's getting to the net and making things happen. He's scoring goals in so many different kinds of ways, and really has been, a huge pickup for this team that has just been decimated, especially, on the offensive side of the puck. So, yeah, the move to get Durocher is something that, has been a huge boost for this team, really when they needed it the most.
I'm going to open up, or actually, as we start to close up shop here, we've already opened it. Go ahead and around the horn, the four of us have our final thoughts, and I'll start ladies first because I'm a gentleman.
Oh, what exactly are you looking for right now?
Just your final.
You didn't exactly finish that thought.
No, just your final thoughts on the entire deadline, what you're looking for going into the playoffs, and things like that.
We've said it 1,000 times. It was quiet. It was definitely really quiet. I said it before too, just a couple minutes ago. We have college pickups. So we'll see how that works out for the teams who maybe we expected to make a move but didn't. See how that works out for them. Cincinnati, of course, we're one of those teams. I'm thrilled to see what happens coming down the stretch as far as these college guys go. Wheeling didn't surprise me one bit because I think they are a constantly revolving door and must work out for them because they're doing decently well this season despite all the injuries. So Florida came out on top. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch in the playoffs. And for these teams that are currently battling out to even get a playoff spot, it's going to be a fun playoffs. It's going to be a fun end of the season to pay attention to all around.
Yeah, I think we'll look an indirect winner of today's inactivity. It's the 3 seeds in each division right now. Nobody in the 3, 4, 5 range in any division really got much better. So if you're a team like Cincinnati, like Wichita, and you see that the teams behind you didn't do much, maybe you could take a little bit of a sigh of relief, knowing that Kalamazoo or Kansas City or Allen didn't really land that big fish that might really start a surge for that 3 and 4 seed in your division.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying earlier, Matt, giving Utah the win for this trade deadline. I mean, like you said, the record speaks for itself when you win 9 straight games and ultimately pull yourself up by the bootstraps out of the basement in the Mountain Division, to pick up, Gage Asmus, and from Colorado, when you trade away Cliff Watson and Ryan Olson, here I was thinking that Watson and Olson were, part of the fabric of the Grizzlies going forward. But, when you have a losing record, I guess all names are on the table. But the fact that you bring in Joel Rumpel, like you were saying, from Wichita, unfortunately, you've got 2 contracted goalies there in Wichita, so something's got to give. It's kind of the Brandon Comm situation in Manchester earlier in February. Something had to give. You can't really keep 3 goaltenders on the roster. So for Utah to just, get themselves up out of the basement and to contend for that 4th and final playoff spot in the Mountain Division, I would just second your opinion on that, Matthew, is that, Utah won the trade deadline long before it was today.
I completely agree. If there were going to be losers, and I don't think we assigned losers, but I would say maybe Kansas City for the fact that they didn't pick up anybody to help out Mark Cooper, who is the team's leading scorer. But again, they did that with Corey DeRoche and CJ Ike. So I would have liked to seen them pick up maybe one more offensive guy this year. Again, Kenton Miller, a name that comes to mind from Quad City. It would be a huge boost to that offense if they get Mike McMurtry back, who had 33 points in 31 games. It does not look like he's coming back, though, to Kansas City at any point in the near future. So it would have been nice to see the Mavericks pick up somebody to help Mark Cooper shoulder the load offensively. Then Tulsa on the other side. For me, I would have liked to seen them pick up a guy who can be the enforcer, power forward, Jack Nevin's role in Idaho and create space for Adam Pleskash and Charlie Samper and those guys in Tulsa, so that they can solidify their position in the Western Conference. But I completely agree with what was said already, that if you're 3-4, that if you're a 3 or 4 team, it's good to know that the teams below you didn't make huge strides to come upon you, player-wise anyway, at least today, to come upon you and potentially steal that spot. That said, though, the 3, 4, 5 spots in the entire league moving forward through the next month are going to be absolutely incredible to watch. The pendulum swings in each of those fan bases every night are going to be wild to watch. So I can't wait to chronicle that as we move forward. So that is going to do it for us. We've been on the air for almost 2 hours. So thank you all very much for giving up part of your Thursday night. From my right to left, bottom of the screen, thank you very much, Kristen, for taking the time out to join me. And I'm very sorry about the issues with the audio. I'm so glad we got that fixed. Thank you very much for being my ride or die here this year.
Oh, anytime. Thank you for having me. No worries about the issues that happens. All
right, awesome. And then Joe Rozicki, my man there in Independence, and Cece Hockley, thank you all very much for joining us. Also, thanks to, let's go down the list, top to bottom. DJ Abasilla, Josh Heisman, Jesse Liebman, Cameron Turner, and Joe Roberts for joining us as we put a bow on trade deadline 2017-2018, Matt, in the ECHL. And the countdown to the Kelly Cup playoffs starts in earnest on Friday night. We'll be there to chronicle it all for you at thesinbin.net. For everybody on the cast, I'm Matthew Harding. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a pleasant Thursday evening.
Take care.